Hi there everyone, and welcome to Paper Wishes Weekly Webisodes. I'm Sarah Newman, and I'm excited to bring you the 21st episode of Mixed Media, The Paper Wishes Way. Today we're going to play with new embossing folders from our friends at Creative Expressions. I want to show you a couple of ways to incorporate these versatile tools into your card making, combining them with some of my favorite mixed media techniques, including opal polish, spattering, and heat embossing as well. Now for all of my projects today, I'm going to be using the Blue Persuasions collection in both 12 by 12 as well as 6 by 6. Now these collections have beautiful florals, swirls, and geometric patterns in gorgeous shades of blue. Now both size collections also include cutouts that are scaled to size. And there's a matching set of 31 die cuts, which you can see I've already gotten into a little bit here. So we have a lot to play with today. I've got 3 card projects to share with you and a couple of demos too. I'm really glad you're joining us, so come play with us. Let's take a closer look at our 4 embossing folders. Now, embossing folders are a really versatile tool for any paper crafter, and they're one of my favorite go-to items in my craft room because you can do so much with them. So today we have Moroccan tile, we have graduated dots, we have stripes, and we have symmetry in play. And I'm just going to open this up a little bit so that you can see that there's a beautiful floral motif in either corner. Now the folders measure 5 3/4 by 7.5 inches, so they're the perfect size for card backgrounds. Now I know that a lot of you are really familiar with embossing folders, but for those who are new to them, I'm going to show you how easy they are to use. So you simply open up your plastic folder and take a piece of cardstock. I'm using some from the Blue Persuasion cardstock, and you can just nest this right up to the fold here. Close your embossing folder and run it through your die cutting machine. These folders will work with most leading die cutting machines, but remember you'll probably need to use a different combination of plates than what you use for die cutting. So do be sure to check the directions on your machine. Now after you run your folder through your machine, you will have a piece with really gorgeous depth. And of course you can use either side. So you'll have an embossed side and a debossed side as well. And because of the size of these folders, you can emboss a large piece of cardstock to cover the front of your card, or you can emboss a smaller or die cut piece. Now here's one that I embossed with the Symmetry in Play collection. And remember, we have a floral motif on one side and then on the other side. But if you want only one of those corners, you can just run your folder partway through your die cutting machine, and then you get a smaller set. So I can take this, I've mounted this onto a piece of that blue cardstock, Blue Persuasion cardstock. Here's a card that I've covered with some of that Blue Persuasion 12 by 12 paper. So I could just simply pop this down here. I could take a dazzle that is on a circle die cut with a scallop behind there, and maybe even a little orange ribbon for some contrast. And I've got a really nice, quick and easy card. So you can see how versatile these are, and also how easy it is to combine a little bit of just plain tone-on-tone white embossing onto the front of your card. Now, of course, you can do some altering as well. You can highlight the raised area with a medium like opal polish. So let's take a look at how to do that. Highlighting a raised embossed area with a medium like opal polish will give you a really beautiful defined effect like you can see here on this border. It's also really easy to do. So let's take a look. Okay, I'm going to start with a piece of plain white cardstock that I've embossed with the graduated dots. And I'm going to grab my Blue Wisteria Opal Polish. Now all I need to do is get a bit of this gorgeous medium on the built-in applicator. So we've done lots of webisodes using the opal polish, and this is just another great way to put them to use. So you have a built-in sponge applicator. You're just going to pick up a bit of that medium. Now the trick here is to make sure you don't overload the sponge and get it too gloopy on there, because then the polish will get into the areas in between the raised pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to take a very, very light touch and simply apply the opal polish right on top. And you can see how beautifully that enhances the design. Now, of course, since I have the debossed side as well, I can get a completely different look if I were to use the opal polish here. So let's take a look at this. This way I'm getting the debossed area, and I'm still getting a really fun polka dot design, but a little bit different look. So 2 ways to go with your opal polish and your embossing folder. Okay, so let's get back to the card. I'll show you this again and we can take another look. So here you can see I've embossed the patterned cardstock with the dots and highlighted that design. Then I cut it into a strip and added it as a border along the front of the card. Now the card itself is covered with this gorgeous floral pattern paper, and the focal is one of the cutouts from the 12 by 12 paper pack, simply mounted onto light blue cardstock. Now before attaching that with foam tape, I wrapped the front of the card with blue ribbon. And on the inside of my card, I've got a piece of the blue persuasion paper, and that's just covering the ends of the ribbon. Makes it look a little bit tidier. Then I've got a die-cut scallop circle and a die-cut message on here. Now, another way to use the embossing folders and opal polish is with a bit of spattering. So let's take a look at this. And you can see that here I've embossed my white cardstock with the stripes folder, and I wanted to keep this clean look but add a bit of color. So I just spattered it with watery opal polish. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to get my striped piece here. You can see I've got my opal polish. And for this, working onto my craft mat, I'm going to decant a little bit of this opal polish with my palette knife and just pop that here onto my craft mat. And then I'm going to take my Distress Splatter Brush. Now I'm going to get this a little bit wet. I've got a jar of water over to one side here, and just kind of deposit a bit of water here. Using my palette knife, I'm just going to create a sort of watery mix of opal polish. It's not too much water, just really a little dab will do it. And then taking my wet spatter brush, I'm going to load this up with the medium and then simply spatter. And this is going to give me a beautiful, textured, dimensional, colorful background. So you can do as much or as little as you want to. Then go ahead and just let this dry and you're ready to use it onto your card. Okay, I'm going to mop this up quickly and we can take another look at the card itself. And you can see here that I've got my really cool background. I've used it on the entire front of my card, and I've just added a strip of pattern paper, mounted that onto some perfectly matching cardstock, and wrapped it around the embossed piece before gluing it all to the card front. My focal is a die-cut element mounted onto the scalloped circles, and for the card inside, I've simply combined more of that splattered background with pattern paper and again a cutout from the 12 by 12 paper pack. Okay, I have one more technique to show you, and this time it's using embossing powder. This card uses the Moroccan tile embossing folder on white cardstock, and when I tilt this, I think you can see the shine and the color on here. Now this is from the Hydrangea embossing powder from the Park Floral Trio from Wow Embossing. And this is going to give us beautiful texture and shine, combining dry embossing and heat embossing together. Okay, let's take a look at how to do this. I'm going to move these elements aside and bring in my piece of white cardstock that has been dry embossed with our Moroccan tile. Now to do heat embossing, of course, you need to have a couple of materials on hand. Of course, you need your embossing ink pad and you need to have your embossing powder. You're also going to need something like a folded piece of scrap paper on hand to catch the excess powder. And of course, your heat tool as well. So I'm going to take my embossing ink pad and I'm just going to tap it onto my raised portion of my dry embossed piece of cardstock. So I'm not squashing it down here, but I am making sure that I make contact with the raised elements. Okay, so I've got that. Then I'm going to open up my piece of folded scrap paper and put this inside, and then just sprinkle on my embossing powder. You can tap off some of the excess here, and you can see the area where that embossing powder is stuck to my embossing ink. So now one other thing that I find really comes in handy, especially when you're working with detailed areas, if you have any stray little granules of embossing powder, you can use a fine tip paintbrush to just whisk those elements away. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just get my embossing powder back into the jar and then heat set my embossing powder on here. So if you give me just a minute, I'll melt this embossing powder and we'll take a look. And there you can see that melted embossing powder and that beautiful color and shine. Now back to the card, you can see I've used the 6x6 patterned blue persuasion papers. And the patterns are scaled down in size from the 12x12 version. So they really do look beautiful on cards, and they're the perfect size to just pop onto the front of your card. Now I added the embossed piece on the front and then mounted a cutout from the 6x6 paper pack onto a series of scalloped squares. I have a little ribbon accent here, and this element is a border cutout from the 6x6 paper pack. The thanks is a die cut sentiment as well. Now, on the card inside, I repeated the series of scalloped squares, also with a little cutout message on there. So with this last card, I think we can see just how much fun we can have with these new embossing folders and beautiful coordinating papers and die cuts. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for being a part of the Paper Wishes family. We're really glad you're here with us, and I can't wait to see what you create. Do be sure to leave a comment. We love to hear what you think. Each item can be purchased separately, and you can see them below. However, we've also bundled them into a creative money saver just for you. For the money saver, just see this webisode on paperwishes.com.